All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Summer Series. And have we got an incredible story to share with you today? It is about bankruptcy. It is about money trauma and how that's turned into a flourishing property portfolio, Ben.
This is a playbook story, Bryce, about how when you do the basics really well, you're unstoppable, in terms of financial transformation towards financial, but you're just putting it beyond doubt. And that's what our guest today, Dale, has been able to do. I can't wait for everyone to learn about Dale's story.
It is an incredible story, folks. Stick around. Let's rip into the show.
Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, co-host of Escape from the City on the ABC, and partner of Empower Wealth Advisory. Ben Kingsley, Chair of Property Investors Council of Australia and the founder of Empower Wealth Advisory, named the 2018 and 2019 Property Advisory Firm of the Year. Stay tuned as they bring you the insider's guide to property, finance and money management.
All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Summer Series here on the Property Couch podcast. Welcome back to you too, Ben.
Thanks for having me, mate. I love this time of the week where we get to talk all things property, finance and money management. And the Summer Series, we are basically putting a spotlight on an individual journey here. And today is a ripper.
It's an incredible story. It actually shows some of the backstory around what they learnt from observing their parents' story, what impact that actually had on them, and how they overcame some of the limitations from that thinking. So I think it's an incredible story, folks. We shouldn't delay any further. I think you and I should go and listen to the conversation we had recently with Dale. All right, Ben, we've got another very special guest on this episode of the Summer Series. We are chatting with TPC listener Dale. First of all, welcome to the Property Couch, Dale.
Thank you so much, Bryce. Great to be here.
It's just so exciting to be chatting with you. And our listeners can't see this, Dale, but we've got you in the car. You're on your iPhone. You are driving on your way to Albury, and you've got the kids sort of being looked after by the family. So we appreciate the sacrifice that you're making just to have a conversation with us today. But I think you know where I'm going to start the conversation. If you've listened, I know you're a long-time TPC listener. So we really want to get nice and deep on the backstory and find out what it was like for you growing up and the conversations you were having over the dinner table as a kid around money. Were there any conversations, Dale?
Look, Bryce, probably not openly passive or active conversations. I was brought up on a rice and cattle farm in the Riverina, so money was always extremely tough. So mum and dad didn't openly talk about money or strategies they were using, but I guess as kids, myself and my two brothers and sister probably learnt by more so observing their behaviours and observing what they were actually doing.
What did you observe?
That delayed gratification piece where, when you want something, you need to wait for it, you need to save for it. And predominantly hard work, real hard graft and hard grind to get where you need to be. And if you needed more money, you just worked harder.
What did that look like in terms of obviously growing up on a rice and cattle farm, and my wife's a family of farmers, and so I know that they start you at a young age. What was I suspect there wasn't any opportunity for sort of a paper round or a milk run or working at the local KFC. So I'm assuming you did spend most of your time working on the farm, and did you get some type of reward for that? Like, was there any sort of pocket money?
Yeah, we started working on the farm extremely early and learned to work very hard very early in our lives. I can remember when I was quite young, Dad used to pay us $1 an hour, and I thought, probably back then a 10-year-old, I thought if I could drive the tractor for 10 hours today, that gets me $10, and I was pretty happy with that. 10 hours in a tractor for a 10-year-old is a very long day. And also we used to hand rear sheep and calves and stuff like that for our own pocket money. So everything revolved around working towards it. It was never any just, here's your pocket money, spend it as you will.
Can you give us some insights for those people that didn't grow up on a farm, what that looked like, and the management of money and weather conditions and all of the elements that need to be managed, and the fact that you obviously would have been exposed to the external of that, but did you get to see the running of the business and what that looked like, and in times when it was tough?
We sort of got a lot of exposure to the seasonal type of the farming industry, as well as yields and profit margins and that sort of stuff. Dad was constantly doing calculations on fuel consumption on machinery, chemical applications, fertilizer rates, yields of crops. So we sort of got a lot of insight into that, but not so much the business side of farming, essentially.
And Dale, in terms of you're obviously in the Riverina there, what did you spend your money on, or did you become a forced saver because, again, you couldn't roll down to the local milk bar and get $1 worth of mixed lollies or anything like that? What was the story there in terms of what did you do with the money that you earned through working on the farm?
A lot of it, we had nowhere to spend money because we were 60 kilometres from town. So a lot of that incidental spending wasn't available to us.
Yep.
So, and then also that helped reinforce that delayed gratification, that if you wanted something, you had to wait till you travelled to a bigger town to be able to buy something. So a lot of the money we had was sort of spent towards motorbikes or farm things. And then I sort of started investing in the share market quite early. When I was about 15, when CBA first floated, I put some of my money into a share purchase at that young age.
And so you had your own bank accounts as kids? Did you, sort of have the Dolomites or something along those lines?
Yeah, we had the Dolomite account where we'd take a few coins off to school each week and put into the account, and then we'd sort of contribute our own wages that we got into that, or if we worked for other farmers in the area and we got paid, we'd either have a money jar or a money box in the bedroom, or you'd deposit it into the bank account.
And where did the interest in the share investing and sort of learning about money making money, how did that start? Because it's not often you hear the story of people your age, at 15, I should say, starting to dabble in the share market.
Probably early on, I would say, I think it was Paul Clitheroe's Money Show. I do have clear recollections of watching that at home. And, that save 10% of everything you earn and invested here and compounding and that sort of thing. So I was also, I guess, through the farming, I also learnt that you need to work harder than the next person beside you to earn more or to succeed. So when he sort of suggested that you need to save 10% of each paycheck you get, I took that, well, if 10% is good, 15% must be better. So I saved more than what was recommended. And then when CBA were floating, Dad sort of suggested that it might be a good option and a good opportunity to get in early while they were floating.
Yeah, we're about the same vintage, just a little bit younger than us, Dale, but we were exposed to the same things, the float for Telstra, the float for CBA. And, obviously you said the spark for your investing was Dad. So why do you think he thought it was important for you to get involved in the share market?
I guess he saw that it was an avenue or an investment vehicle to make some return, to earn a dividend yield and potentially some exposure to some capital growth as well. He'd never invested in the stock market in his time either, and I guess he'd never had the spare available cash to be able to do that. But Dad wasn't an educated person. He left school quite young and went straight into farming, but he was self-taught with economics and finance and that sort of thing. So he was able to offer us some invaluable advice there, and he could see the longer term benefits in investing early on. So I bought CBA. I also bought Telstra, and it just sort of continued. That habit continued even at uni or when I was backpacking around the world. I still managed to put aside or quarantine 10 or 15% of every paycheck I got and invest that into the stock market, even when I was backpacking.
Now, Dale, in terms of, as you said, it was 2 brothers and 2 sisters.
2 brothers and 1 sister.
2 brothers and 1 sister. Did they develop similar interests and money habits as you on the back of conversations with your dad and mum, or, you know, were they different in terms of their style? Did money burn holes in their pockets when they did go to town and they wanted to get the cap guns and the different toys and all of that sort of stuff?
My older brother, he was probably a little bit more ruthless with his money and was happy to accept more risk and probably spend a lot more of his money.
Yeah.
My sister and my younger brother were quite frugal though, and they didn't actually spend a lot. So, and
Right.
they've all later in life, they've all now got they've all got their own PPOR, and then they've all got one investment property each as well.
Wow. So there's some. So, and what about the oldest brother? Did he, the one who was the spender, has he got an investment property as well?
He does, yes. Yeah, he's
turned the corner.
He's curbed those habits a little bit as he's matured. Yeah.
Where do you rank in the birth order there, Dale?
I'm third.
You're third. So, but everyone has got investment properties, which is a little unique in a family. Well, maybe yes or no. But who went first?
Me.
Yeah. Okay. So you led the charge, and then were they asking questions of you, and you were answering, or they wanted to model you? What was the impact that you were having on the decisions that they subsequently made?
Yeah, they would certainly ask me questions about what I was doing and how I was going about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that just highlighted to them that you can do it, and that there are different strategies and different approaches. Because I've never actually been a high income earner, so when they could see me acquiring multiple properties, I think and when they would also hear some of the feedback about how it was going and how it was successful, I think they could see the benefits to it, and they've sort of got on board from there.
Now we're going to get to the multiple property story, because, you know, that's when the rubber really hits the road. But you're coming through your adolescent years. You're obviously, schooling is important to you, and you're working on the farm. Tell us what your intentions were at that time. Did you see yourself working on the family farm, building out that asset? What was that story like, you know, as you were sort of getting into your sort of later years and young adult years?
Yeah, I finished high school and went off to university at Canberra, and I sort of never had intentions of returning to the farm. I'd sort of seen how much of a struggle it was on life, and how hard you had to work for very little gain. But then once I'd finished university, I was sort of drawn back to the farm, and worked there sort of up until I was about 26, on and off. And then eventually just came to the realisation that agriculture was going to be a very tough life for me. And I didn't feel that the Australian government really supported small rural going concerns. And I sort of decided to part company and find my own path from there.
Now, Dale, because rice and cattle, right? Like, rice is obviously water intensive. You're in the Riverina area of South Australia. So, you know, this is that whole challenge around getting water down to obviously where you are with the Murray-Darling systems and, you know, the battles around water. We know in the notes here that there is a significant change that occurred. Tell us a little bit about, that ultimate outcome.
Which one is that?
The farm going into bankruptcy.
Oh, yeah. So we went through a period of drought in the early 2000s. The farm was set up with mum and dad on one farm and my grandparents on another farm. So it was a whole family sort of venture. And my grandfather passed away. My father pretty much went into a full breakdown. Drought, we were feeding out a semi-load of hay per day, and it was just not sustainable. And eventually the administrators were appointed, and everyone pretty much walked away with the shirts on their back and lost everything, really.
Yeah, that's an extraordinary thing. And I think we've got to recognise, for all of our rural listeners and communities out there, it is, you know, some years it's amazing. But geez, for every, you know, one out of the box year, there are a lot of years where basically farming is just basically food to mouth type stuff. It's not easy to do. And obviously that was, you know, a challenge for your family. What did that, in going through that and seeing your dad go through those struggles, what did it say for you about, you know, the life that you wanted to then create for yourself?
I think as a younger adult, my only concern is that I didn't want to grow up broke. I didn't want to be poor. I'd sort of lived that life growing up, and whatever I did, I didn't want to be broke, but I knew I had to work hard But I was also very skeptical about debt and leverage because I'd seen Dad go through the late 80s paying exorbitant interest rates, and he was actually quite close to paying off the farm through that early 80s. And then through drought, through massive interest rates, and then trying to borrow money to put crops in to recover, it just continued to escalate out of control and spiraled. So for me, that debt story was a real concern for me when it came time for me to borrow money.
How did you deal with that?
As my share trading continued and I got better at it and more confident, I went into margin lending. And I sort of got a little bit more comfortable with borrowing at a good LVR, at a good loan to value ratio, so that I wasn't getting margin calls, and just little bits at a time. And then I could see how that leverage could improve my earnings and my growth, that exposure. So I kind of got comfortable with leverage in smaller proportions through share trading.
Well, that's one way to deal with the fear, is to just leap into margin lending. It's not like you dip your toe in the water.
Yeah. Like,
but it's all relative.
Yeah, like I've never borrowed money to buy a car. I've never had credit card debt. I don't think I've ever actually had a personal loan in my life. So leverage for investing, I was more comfortable with because it was that good debt story rather than tolerable or bad debt.
And you use the most powerful instrument of all, which is your brain and your education around deciding that, so you had this mindset shift that you were deciding that you never want to be poor. You want to always make sure that there's money available for you. And as I said, you had a brain that allowed you to educate yourself. You talk about sort of reading and educating yourself, and Warren Buffett's in that mix. Tell us about, the sort of the lessons you've learnt from some of his work.
Yeah, so when I was trading the stock market or involved in the stock market, I read very widely, not only Warren Buffett, but a vast array of readings, magazines, books, internet, everything, significant readings. So I looked at a lot of technical as well as fundamental analysis. And that Warren Buffett piece was about looking at businesses or industries that I thought were going to be successful, and then putting some money towards them. I certainly was no stock trading expert. I was more just that enthusiastic amateur. But I guess I was able to do enough research, and I'm a very analytical person. So that sort of helped me. And the Warren Buffett piece around, talking to people that have got skin in the game, get some advice or listen to their storytelling and their experiences so that I could learn from their experience rather than making my own mistakes. And then also the be greedy when people are fearful and be fearful when people are greedy. That saying saved me a lot of money in 2007. So,
yeah.
Tell us more about that.
I was in the stock market on a margin loan. I had about a portfolio of about 120,000, which for someone in their mid-20s, for me in particular, was a significant whack of cash. And I was looking at the stock market and I thought, this cannot just keep happening. You could throw a dart at a newspaper, buy a share, and it would go up. The media was talking about everybody's making so much money and this is just going to continue on forever. And I just had that epiphany and I thought, this cannot go on forever. I need to take some profits out of this. Listening to that Warren Buffett piece about be fearful when people are greedy. So over the 2 financial years in December, I sold out of my portfolio completely. I think I finished selling out in September 07 and the GFC hit in October. So I took all of my money out of the stock market and that was when I started in property.
Brilliant.
Yeah, masterstroke.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, more luck than anything else, I think, but just very lucky.
Well, I think it's taking some advice from someone who's gone with it, because when people quote that quote, they often use it to be fearful when others are greedy is usually the side of the equation they don't lean on the most, and it's be fearful when others are greedy. Be greedy when others are fearful.
Yeah,
and that's the bit when it gets used and trotted out the most. So you've actually executed at a point when it's actually hard to do, when the euphoria is kicking in and everyone, you feel like you're going to miss out on the party. And at the time, it would have taken some real strength of mind to do it. But so it's everyone's an expert looking back, but it's when you're in those moments where it's a real tough thing. You said you're an analytical person. How has that served you, and how has it not served you going forward? And the question is probably around: is there a tendency to get paralysis by analysis, or do you get security from the analytics, and then once you've done enough, it helps you take action?
No, I think, yes, very analytical. It has served me extremely well in my acquisition phase of property investing, being able to know my own local economy and market where I'm investing, and then breaking that down into each individual property and street and suburb. And so the analytical part of me has certainly helped. I haven't suffered too much from paralysis through analysis. I've still been able to use that formal decision-making process about collecting information, and the more information I have, the better decisions I can make. And then I would sort of break it down into a decision-making and a risk management process.
So take us through that framework in terms of so you're 27, you're 26, 27, you beat the market by basically taking your winnings, leaving the casino, and you're out the other side and you pivot towards property, right? And so you start to get, this understanding and you're starting to build knowledge in the property space. So what were you looking at? What were you listening to? How were you building your frameworks?
Back then, it was more magazine-based. Like, I would ask for magazine subscriptions for birthday presents and Christmas presents. So I can't remember what they'll call Your Property magazine and a couple other different ones.
Yeah, your investment
again,
property.
Investment property. And just being widely read, and then cutting out pages of the real estate paper rather than internet back then. That was back in the early, that earlier period of the 2000s.
You're old school, Dale.
Yes,
welcome to my world.
Technology and I are not friends. So, So, and then it was just about comparing and looking at the market. I was looking at buying in Parramatta for the first time, where I was living in Sydney at the time, and just looking at properties and going, okay, well, this one's worth this much. This one over here is worth this much. Why is it worth that much? What's the discount rate of this suburb? What's the days on market? What's my expected yield? Just doing my own figures. Like, you could always ask an agent, what can I expect to get for rent? And they would give you a figure. But a lot of the time you need to be very careful around accepting those figures and make sure you make your own decisions. Just a lot of those very basic calculations, but understanding how those calculations affect one another. And if you can manipulate one calculation, how that changes the bottom line.
I'm interested to know why you pivoted to property, because you got out when others were greedy. You said, it's time for me to be fearful. So you got out, the market shifted, you had a stack of cash. I'm wondering, was there a thought where you go, well, these assets that I just were investing in are now cheap, I should go in and buy them? But no, you decided to pivot to property. What was going on in your mind at that time to pivot asset classes?
I think I'd been living in Sydney for a couple of years at that time, and I think I'd become more accustomed to the price of what you've got to pay. When I first moved to Sydney from the country, I thought property prices were exorbitant. I thought there is no way in hell I'm going to buy a property in Sydney. But I just become accustomed to the price that you had to pay in Sydney, and I could see that the property market had probably plateaued a little bit and gone nowhere for a little bit. And I felt, being a very practical person, I could buy and renovate and add some value that way. And then I was my approach was that I was renting the property from the bank to buy me some exposure to capital gain. And the tenant was helping me rent it from the bank, essentially.
Yeah, I think that's a great that is a great mindset justification statement.
Yeah,
that's what it is, right? It's basically turning it into a positive flavor to allow you to feel comfortable with taking on the debt.
Renting from the bank to expose myself to capital growth.
Yeah, I was basically my thought was that I was buying exposure to capital growth, and then I could also use my practical skills to do some renovations and add value to the asset that way.
Beautiful.
All right, you've got a pretty good property story, so let's kick it off. So talk to us about. We just talked about the mindset around the pivot. You've pivoted into property. What was that first one like? What was the deal? Where was it?
Can I just
Yeah,
before we jump in, can I just say you then became a firefighter? Because I want the context of the, you talk about earning an average wage as a firefighter. That would help set that up in terms of, you're not on an exorbitant wage. You're not the CEO of a company. You're not doing any of that type of stuff. So I think that tells an interesting story, right? That what you're about to unpack is quite remarkable.
Yeah, so I started out as a firefighter. That was the whole reason I left the farm and moved to Sydney. So I think at the time that I bought, my partner and I at the time bought the first unit in Parramatta, which was a 2-bedroom walk-up, probably a block from the river and maybe 3 or 4 blocks from the CBD of Parramatta. I think I was literally probably on about $50,000 a year, so certainly not a high income earner whatsoever. Yeah. That was the first purchase, so had a little bit of help there with first homeowners grant where we didn't have to pay the stamp duty, and that certainly helped us get into the market. But we were able to afford it anyway, just through money that I pulled out of the stock market. That's where I then moved that cash asset to. So yeah, did a lot of research and a lot of looking and investing in property or reading about it and learning and educating myself, and then eventually made that first purchase, and with a lot of fear and anxiety and the FOMO, as you spoke about recently, fear of messing up.
So this was 2008?
07, I think late 07.
07? Okay, late 07. And can you share what you paid for that?
$285 for a 2-bedroom unit with a tandem garage.
Okay, and so you got acclimatise to the prices and what you got to pay. So $285 at the time was a lot of money, right? So there was a few sweat beads, and you had to embrace another level of debt for you.
Yep.
So talk us through how that went. You said you and your partner did that. Was this for you to? You'd moved to Sydney. Were you living in it, or were you renting somewhere else and you rented this out?
No, we were renting prior to the purchase. Then once we purchased, we lived into it, and that was to satisfy the first homeowners grant, basically.
Oh, of course, yep.
And so we took on a lot more debt, and I'd done some homework about what we could expect for rent after we moved out of it, and if that would help finance the interest rates and the repayments on it. And when I do my analysis, I'm also quite conservative. And if I can't make the analysis work on worst case scenario, then I don't engage or I don't pursue it. So on this one, I was able to sort of go, well, worst case scenario, if we get $300 a week rent for it afterwards, I can still make it work. But then as it happened, by the time I'd done the renovations, we ended up renting it out for $350 a week. So that gives you that bit of breathing space, and that helps you to manage the risk by being conservative in your calculations to begin with.
Yeah, but you've done a reno straight up, so just in true style. First exposure to lending, we'll make it margin lending. So first exposure to property, let's just renovate. So talk us through that. How did you fund it? How much of it did you do yourself? What were the wins? What were the losses?
Pretty much did the entire thing myself. Being a strated unit, there wasn't any significant work. It was a new kitchen, new flooring, new light fittings, added some cupboard space, which I sort of felt was a valuable asset, a valuable addition to the unit, particularly in the Sydney market. So pretty much did the entire renovation myself and just educated myself on YouTube, the internet, or other friends who'd worked in trades that could offer me some advice. And then investing in my tools that would allow me to do the work. So we spent about $15,000 on it, and pretty much transformed the unit inside that $15,000. But looked at smart ways to spend my money for what I knew was going to add value and make it rent well.
Oh, so you're thinking about that nice and early about strategic moves rather than it being, emotional moves for, what you wanted to live in, which is great. Did you get to realise the uplift in the value because of that reno? So for the $15K you spent, did you get a sense of how much extra equity you created?
No, well I did, but I didn't get any extra equity apart from what we spent. We
Yeah.
So I'd sort of been aware of the capital gains issue that it may present going forward. So when we moved out, we had it valued so that I had that asset value when we vacated. So we bought it for 285. I spent 15,000 on it, and it got valued at 300. So I was pretty disappointed by that, but I was also conscious that the valuer was probably being conservative in his valuations, and I felt there was maybe a little bit extra value there, but it certainly wasn't revolutionary in the equity gain. No.
Well, that's the bank val, right? Remember, which is naturally
Yeah.
conservative. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. But I could see that it increased the rent a lot higher than I expected the rent was going to be.
Yep.
And then because it was that nice asset, that then minimised my vacancy rates and improved the appeal of the property. So it sort of had other effects.
And, you know, we're about to head into the GFC, right, at this point in time. So, and that's an interesting time in the property market as well. So what happens next after you decide you're renting it out or you're moving? Because we haven't really highlighted the fact that you've met your future partner who's, or you're married at this stage?
No, with a partner, a girlfriend at the time who's no longer in the picture.
Right. Okay. So is that the critical move that made the change? Because it's not sitting in your portfolio now. So I'm trying to get to that story.
No. So being a country boy, my intention was always to move back to a regional area. So I eventually got the opportunity to relocate back to Albury with work.
Yep.
So I worked in Albury, but lived out of town in a smaller satellite town. And because I didn't want to buy in that small town, we just rented for a couple of years and saved up for a deposit to buy something in Albury.
Right. So you got to transfer as a firey into, but at this stage, it's also the partner at the time saying probably not interested in a regional life, and so that relationship falls down.
No. She was happy for regional. She was happy to go back to a country area. It sort of failed just because of personal differences ongoing as relationships do. As
they do. Yep. So you rent that one out. So take us through the sequence here.
So rented that property out in Parramatta. I knew, or I had an understanding that the first 3 years were going to be the toughest until we'd sort of either paid down the debt a little bit or we'd got some increase in rental return.
Yep.
And as well, we had some small increments in wages as well. So the longer we went on, the easier that got, and the more comfortable I got with the process because I could see how it was working and I could see it evolving in front of me. So then we made a decision to buy a PPOR in Albury. And again, we'd saved up enough money to pay the deposit for that and get on board there. Yep. And that was in 2010. We bought the second property in 2010.
Yep. Okay. And look, there's a couple of things I want to double click on what you talked about just a moment about that the doing actually builds the comfort. The doing and seeing the movement and feeling comfortable with the debt. That's the conditioning that happens after you do. Now, this is what we've been saying throughout the course of 2022 is that the people who are taking action now in a difficult market are actually the repeat offenders in a way. They're the ones who have not listened to the noise, who have not got caught up in that, and they're adding to their portfolio because it's a good time to add to their portfolio. So I think that's a nice message, but it resonates in the message that you're saying is it just becomes comfortable. You just understand it because you've done the numbers, you got visibility on it, and really you don't care what it's worth tomorrow. You care what it's going to be worth in 20 or 30 years' time from now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as my knowledge and my experience in understanding the calculations got better, I got much better at making the decisions and much more comfortable because, as I'm sure you guys have said in the past, with that knowledge, you're minimizing the risk because your decisions are far better.
Yeah.
So as I gained more experience, I think I spent less time making decisions to buy a property than I did to buy a set of tyres for my car.
Yes. Yep. I know that feeling. I still haven't seen a couple of my properties.
Yeah. And you just get more comfortable. And as soon as you see a property, you go, that's good value. I can do a lot with that. I want it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you got this PPR in Albury. Did you do anything significant to that, or is the next chess piece that you bought the third property?
So no, it was not long after that purchase that the initial relationship broke down.
Mhm.
So I then bought out my partner on that one.
Yep.
And we were both on the same page that the Parramatta unit was a good investment, so we hung on to that, which was good because ultimately that asset value continued to grow. But as I started to borrow more and buy more properties, the debt against that property started to become an issue because obviously
Yeah.
50% of the equity was allocated to me, but 100% of the liability was allocated to me. So it started to affect my future lending.
Yeah.
So I bought a third property on my own in 2014. And I think we sold a Parramatta unit in 2016 for 620,000.
Ooh, nice.
So you bought it for
Yeah.
285. You added 15, and you
Yep.
bought it for 620,000 in 7
Sold it,
years.
yep. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
It doubled in value.
Yep.
So after you paid you got your 50% share, you paid your capital gains tax. What did you do with that money?
So I think by that stage, obviously there's a few year gap in there between that 2010 and 2014.
Mm-hmm.
I was with a new partner at the time. It was going really well. Again, I'd bought a house in 2014. She bought a house in 2014 as well. So we bought two houses in the same year.
Mm-hmm.
And sold in 2016 at Parramatta. Used that money. I'd been working pretty hard by that stage on renovations and saving and working two jobs to save deposits. So I lashed out a little bit, and my partner Fleur and I, we bought a modest camper trailer and a modest boat, fishing boat, and then I only used a small amount of that 150, and then the rest of it used it to then buy another two properties in 2016 and again in 2017.
All right. You just did fast forward then. So 2000.
Yeah, sorry.
2000.
I've got it all here in front of me. Can I go through?
So,
Yeah, so I
the listeners are not seeing what you're seeing, Ben. So 2014. So in 2014, you bought one, Fleur bought one, and then in 2016 you bought another two.
2016 we bought another one.
Yep.
And then 2017 we bought another one.
Okay.
And Fleur also owned a townhouse in Moama that she had previously.
Okay. So this portfolio is starting to get pretty big then. So start to tell us what's going on. So Fleur's also a property person herself. You've got a meeting of the minds. I mean, she's bought one in 2014. Is that the Moama one as well?
No, she bought the Moama one, I think around 2005 when she was living and working there.
Mm-hmm.
And she was more of the approach of just having a PPOR and then selling. As she moved around, she would sell a property and buy another one where she lived. So deliberately investing probably wasn't really on her radar until we sort of worked through it ourselves, and together we sort of both got on the same page and worked towards that. And then, she bought her house in 2014, which we both lived in.
Yep.
And then also hung on to that when we moved out of it to continue it on as an investment property.
So the one that you bought in 2014, what was that and where was that?
That was in the same street as where my 2010 house was. And we basically ended up buying three houses in the one street. The one that I bought in 2014 was that typical worst house in the best street scenario. Again, even in that, I was a little bit strategic in how I purchased that one. There was that house for sale, and there was a house directly across it for sale on a bigger block. The house that I brought went for auction, and I didn't even attend the auction because I thought it would go for too much. And as it happened, it didn't even get a bid at auction. And I'd sort of know, because I knew the market so well, I could see that people were holding off because they wanted the property across the street that had a bigger block. And I could see people were keeping their hands in their pockets and they were waiting for that property to auction. So after the property that I purchased was then put to market for an advertised price, I jumped in quickly and bought it. then the auction happened across the street, and a lot of those people that were the second and third highest bidder across the street then tried to go back to buy the house that I had just bought.
Nice.
So
Okay.
I could understand that. I could understand that human behaviour part. That
Yeah.
I think people are keeping their powder dry here because they want the bigger block. I'm going to jump in and bid and grab the one that they've all let go because I think they're going to come back to it.
There's only going to be one winner. Hey,
And that was ultimately what happened. Yeah.
and Dale, this is East Albury in New South Wales that we're talking about here. So it's obviously a
Yes.
large regional hub on
Yes.
the border of the Murray River there, Lake
Yes.
Hume and the like. This East Albury area, how much interest did you put in the type of area that you wanted to buy in around owner-occupier appeal and those lifestyle drivers? So to buy 3 in one street is usually about land banking and putting them all together and, using the productivity value that you might be able to get out of them in terms of turning them into townhouses or additional dwellings on site. Tell us about the logic and what you were thinking around the justification for, a concentration of assets in one location.
So I'd done countless hours of research on the whole area in the district, and I'd identified East Albury as being undervalued. There was an almost identical suburb on the other side of Albury CBD, same type of housing, same distance from the CBD, and it was about 25% more expensive than East Albury. So I could see that Albury was undervalued, or that part of East Albury that was undervalued. And I'd spent a lot of time even looking at the council's local environmental plan to understand their future direction and their future strategy, and just the amount of research and homework and time that went into it was significant. And that's why I was confident to buy in that area. And although I understand it is risky to buy all in one area, I also had that purchase to renovate strategy where I needed to be able to access the property so I could renovate it myself. So that first purchase in Mount Street, that purchase in Mount Street in 2014, that worst house in the best street, again, it needed a full renovation. So I did that straight off the bat, rewire, replumb, heating, cooling, flooring, everything, so that I could put it to market for rent in its best condition. And then again, maximise my rental return, minimise my vacancy rates. And then also each renovation and that equity gain was how I then funded the next purchase.
Because what did that first one owe you in 2014? So purchase price plus reno costs, and what is it worth today?
Purchase for 211. Renovation was about 65. But a significant renovation, but that's pretty much just materials. And that's
not your man hour labour.
No factor there. I didn't have to put my hand in my pocket for my own time. Today it's probably worth about 650. After the renovation, obviously there was a bit of an equity gain there, maybe $50,000, $60,000, $80,000. I was then able to refinance, keep that property at an 80-20 LVR, pull out the excess equity to then fund the deposit and the renovation for the next property.
Which was the third in the same street?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So you talk us through the conversations you're having with Fleur at this stage. Fleur's just wanting to buy the house, live in it, sell it if we're moving on. And you're saying, no, we're going on an accumulation journey here, and we're going to hold some of these things. So you were clear on your vision on what you wanted to do. Well, actually, what was your vision? What were you chasing? And secondly, what was the conversations like with Fleur to have her paradigm change?
Yeah, so ultimately, I didn't have a super clear plan or picture in my head. It was only sort of what I'd come up with myself. And for some reason, I had this figure of I need 6 properties, and at retirement, I sell 3 to pay out the other 3, and then I could retire keeping 3 properties. For some reason, that was my ultimate plan. I don't really know where that came from. And no one in my family had ever invested in property at that time either, so it wasn't a real clear picture for me. But Fleur was great. Once we sort of sat down and went through some figures and we did some calculations, and I could demonstrate to her what my intentions were and how I expected it all to happen. She was really good, very supportive. She was on board. She was very patient when I was doing extremely long hours renovating and throwing our spare cash into renovations and saving deposits. So the fact that we were both on board really, really made a difference and supported what we wanted to do.
What's the North Star now? So it was get 6, sell 3, retain 3. Is that has your plan refined since?
Yeah. I think I'm pretty confident we'll get to retirement and we will own all 6. Yeah, we won't have to sell anything. Yeah.
Nice.
And what does that sort of number and sort of time frame look like for you, Dale?
My mindset or my thinking has only really shifted to retirement probably in the last couple of years. Since we've had younger kids, we sort of, again, I knew I needed to get these properties in place before we had kids because I knew I needed to get access to finance. And once our household income was reduced from Fleur working part-time and then having dependents, I knew we wouldn't get finance. So we probably delayed having kids a little bit and pushed pretty hard to borrow during a period where borrowing was quite easy. The banks were pretty liberal with their lending back then.
Yeah.
But as far as now, yeah, we're hoping. I'm unsure. I don't have the capacity to make those longer term calculations about when is enough to retire. The portfolio at the moment is producing about 150,000 a year in rental income. So my very basic rudimentary understanding of it is that should be fairly hinged with CPI. So at retirement, that income should be ample for us to live off, provided it's not encumbered by debt. But we don't really know when that will be. I don't have the ability to make those longer term complex forecasts.
We do. In terms of principal place of residence and a big rock in the jar, what's the plan there?
At the moment, we are renting.
Yep. So you're rent vestors? Yep.
Yes, and we're rent vesting because with my work now, I get a subsidised rent.
Yep.
So that's sort of a way that rent vesting certainly makes sense.
Yep.
Because it is sort of fairly cheap for us to rent comparatively.
Yep.
So we're in the process at the moment of building a significant amount of cash in offset. So if we need to purchase a PPOR, hopefully we've got that money in offset there that we can then use, which will obviously then increase our debt level. But yeah, not real clear on the path forward into retirement, into our 60s.
Landing the plane. There's a few moving parts to this, but I mean, your cash balance, as I'm looking at your more platform, is significant. Your portfolio value, if I'm okay to say, I'll leave it to you to say. It's over.
Yeah, we're in the vicinity of 3.5 of the property value at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and total assets are in excess of 5, right? So, in terms of that, global LVRs are sitting at 56. So you've done all this heavy lifting early, and now it really is about thinking about landing that plane and sort of working out, when you choose to retire, whether you decide to completely retire or whether you want to just work part-time or whatever that looks like. You put yourself into an amazing position there. In terms of how you organise and manage your money, can you talk to us about that story and in terms of what you're doing to sort of inform your decisions?
Yeah, so now that we've sort of gone through that acquisition phase, we're more into a debt consolidation or debt reduction phase of our strategy. So it's more about reducing essentially our overheads. If you look at it from a business perspective, we need to reduce our overheads. Yep. So that's our living costs, the cost of our insurances, just that day-to-day spending. So we've been using the Money Smarts platform, or the now More platform. I've taken a lot of guidance from yourselves and the podcast in regards to that around setting up a living and lifestyle, minimising the amount of my accounts and making sure every account is an offset account. We have the 55-day sweep on our credit card. And it's just about being conscious of that discretionary spending so that we can make sure we've got a maximum the spare cash. I can't remember. It escapes me at the moment. The excess cash.
The surplus cash flow. Yeah.
Sorry, the surplus cash at the end of the year to be servicing debt and reducing capital as much as possible, or building offset accounts.
Yeah, look, it's really healthy here. And in terms of where you're pointing all of the rent, is that because effectively you're a rent investor, right? So the reason why you're not pointing that into a primary account that's offsetting your principal place of residence, you've got, I'm assuming, several buckets that have you got any of them full at the moment? I'm curious because obviously I can see your debt levels here.
Yeah, we've probably got 3 of them are full.
Yeah, it's great.
And another one's part way there. Yeah, so we try and live off my wage, and we try and bank Fleur's wage. She's still working part time, and then I try and quarantine any rental income to servicing debt and paying interest rates and insurance and repairs and maintenance.
Yeah. And some of the loans interest rates are a little bit higher than others. Are they the primary focus for those offset buckets?
The higher rates are interest only, and they are generally the properties that are owned by me because I'm the higher taxpayer.
Right.
So we're able to shuffle money around offset accounts depending on some taxation considerations and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, no, that's making sense. And what does it feel like to know that you've got all of this sort of organised in one location, and like, you know, in terms of being able to, you know, pull all that together and have the platform that's assisting you in that particular regard?
It's fantastic for me to be able to log on to the More platform, see it all in one place, look at some of the pie charts and some of the graphs. It just makes it so much easier for me to understand it. It makes it so much easier for me to be able to explain it to Fleur. Previously to that, I was doing my best to create Excel spreadsheets and forecasting and doing it that way, which, you know, as I'm sure you're aware, doing Excel formulas and that sort of stuff is quite a difficult task. So having the More platform there, I can change one figure and then it goes through the whole program and shows me all the changes, and it really clarifies it for me where we're at. When I go through and change my interest rates, when I go through and change my asset values, it just highlights it all to me instantly and makes a significant difference.
Well, sorry, you go.
The particular one that I have used more recently was the money stretch. When COVID hit, obviously I had a few moments there of anxiety where I thought we could be in real trouble here, like in the early days of COVID.
Yep.
And I rang my managing agent. I said, can you please contact every tenant, find out where they work and if they're out of work or if rental income is going to be a problem. And I was able to get onto Money Stretch and go, yep, this is what I've got. This is what we pay. And I could see I had 3 or 4 years of spare cash there. And that just certainly helped alleviate the stress to go, it's okay, we can survive this. Worst case scenario, we use that buffer and we can get through to the other side. So having that there at the fingertips to be able to run those calculations was amazing.
So one of my questions was how are you feeling with interest rate rises and property sentiment right now? Because it sounds like you gave yourself a dress rehearsal during COVID to batten down the hatches and be really clear on the detail and obviously use the money stretch function. But did that serve you super well now that interest rates are rising? How's your psychology around that?
Yeah, look, interest rates are certainly still a concern. Our household income is not what it used to be when we were both working full time, and to be honest, probably never will be. We never really intend Fleur to go back to full time employment. So yeah, certainly interest rates are at the front of mind, but it's more frustrating for me because we're not reducing the capital or building the offset. More of that money, which was surplus anyway, is just going into servicing interest, which isn't the end of the world. It's just a bit frustrating when you know it's not building that offset account now. So, but certainly we're sort of confident that we can survive. We're confident that we can see a way through. We just need to be on top of it and conscious of it. And you know, look, if we've had a significant gain in asset values, so if that does come back a little bit, it's certainly not the end of the world.
Particularly when you've got to have a balanced view of the upside that you've experienced, and you've also got a significant amount of buffer that allows you to trade through. Because you've never heard us on this podcast say the property price is linear.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing ever is. Nothing is.
The trend is up, but this fluctuates along the way. So, I mean,
Yep.
you've positioned yourself really well for that. As an extension to that, is there people in your network, friendship circle, family, that you get to talk to about property? Are there people that you can relate to in your community that are doing similar things, or is it just something that you're chatting with your brothers and sisters because they're doing it? Who's your network to riff this stuff with?
Probably brothers and sisters. Obviously, talk through it with them, but probably not a hell of a lot of people in the situation that we're in. When you look at the percentage of the population that owns more than 3 investment properties, there's very few people that actually achieve that. Certainly, again, listening as broadly as I can, reading as broadly as I can when I've got the time, and then again, talking it over with Dad, my brothers and sister, just running it by them and sort of debriefing with them at times too, as well as with obviously Fleur, the primary one. With some of what you guys have spoken about in the past as well, like through COVID, I also looked at selling one of the assets. It was about a capital gains exemption on a PPOR, and I considered selling, and I resisted that urge to sell because you guys talk about that longer term, that third decade. So I've really got in my focus maximizing my growth or that compounding effect by achieving that third decade. And because I've invested early, I should quite easily make that third decade. And then my biggest challenge at the moment is probably considering that future planning for generational benefit. You know, it takes one generation to make it, one generation to enjoy it, and one generation to lose it.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to rack my brains and come up with a plan or a strategy to break that cycle.
Yeah, there's a few things in there. I mean, obviously estate planning, blood trusts, and a few other things as you get more sophisticated in that particular realm. I don't think you should be over panicking yourself on that at your healthy age now. But certainly, you know, that comes to the conversation around feeding your children versus teaching them how to fish, right? You know, that's the idea here. So if they can do that, but you know, the other thing is also how big does it need to be, right? Like that's always the biggest challenge when you are talking about family inheritance and how it's all going to be divided and all of those types of things. So, you know, the classic case, as you just said, is the business gets built, the second generation learns the craft from the original founder, and then they build it. But in the background, the kids sort of don't have much time, and you know they're not, and so they're a little bit lost in terms of their purpose, and then they eventually get the money, and then they do stupid things with it. So that's obviously what you're trying to think about there in terms of you know, setting up education trusts for the next 5 generations of your family and all of that. That's that contribution piece, because you're well and truly in financial control, and you're bordering on financial peace where it sits. The other big aspect for you is really around the big rock in the jar in terms of that family home and just how much, I mean, having a small debt on that of $250,000 or whatever for what you've got cash in bank at the moment sort of makes sense to me. That's nothing to worry about. And the fact that all your properties are in that sort of localized area for yourself, you've got a bit of control over them, because the reason why you did that is, you know, as a firefighter, you got 4 days on, 4 days off type arrangements, which has allowed you to obviously, you know, turn these, you know, probably put some sugar on the apple pie here in terms of making them rentable assets. So I think all in all, mate, it's an awesome story. And you should be super proud. You and Fleur have done an enormously powerful job. You had to sell a couple because obviously of a relationship breakdown early, but every other move you've made, there's, coming back to what you were telling to me earlier, there's very little mistakes in this, right? You know, you have listened to others. You have learnt from others. You haven't said, you know, when someone says that fry pan's hot, don't touch it. You haven't touched it, right? You haven't, you know, like, and so from that point of view, you know, all credit to you in terms of what you pulled together. Look, my final question to you is really just around, you've decided to come on the pod. What you know, you've got the mic now, so tell the community what it is that you really want them to take away from your journey and to motivate them.
Yeah, well, I'd been considering putting my hand up for the summer series for a couple of years, to be honest, and didn't feel there was really anything I could offer. And I mentioned it to Fleur this year. I said, I've been thinking about this summer series. And she said, yep, absolutely, you should do it. So ultimately, that was why I put my hand up this year. But as far as advice or a message going forward, there's certainly to the community out there is, again, that start early. You have to make sacrifices. You have to work hard. You have to do your homework. Your own strategy is unique to you. You can't always just copy and repeat what someone else has done because of your risk aversion characteristics, your human behaviour part. Start early, work hard. I don't really know where to add there. It's there's just so much you need to consider.
Well, I mean, ultimately, you've been a DIY, right? You've pretty much done the most of that. You're working with investment savvy mortgage brokers. You've got a tax advisory that's also part of that. But ultimately, the planning piece, in terms of how you've built it, you've gone stage by stage, and yet there hasn't been any sort of professional advice around that piece. You've been able to again sacrifice your time to build a significant asset up here, right? So that's the hard work piece. Now, that is possible for time-poor professionals and that to potentially do it, but you've just done it your way. And it's just another example of someone who's in the field and executing and taking action, and all credit to you for doing that.
Yeah, look, again, the message I do want to send is that you don't have to be a high-income earner to achieve it.
Yeah.
Fleur and I have achieved it on very modest salaries. We are not high-income earners by any means, and it is still achievable. I did it without a formalised plan, which may have had some consequences for me and may still have some consequences going forward. I would suggest to people that plan or roadmap would certainly give you confidence and reassurance in those tough times when you're trying to stay the course. And having that team around you to guide you and keep you on track would certainly be a significant benefit. I haven't had that, but I've also had the self-awareness to be able to regulate myself in that regard.
Well, the trade-off is you've educated yourself deeply to be able to achieve that, and that's a time substitute, right? And it's worked beautifully for you.
Yeah, I do break a lot of things down to very basic equations, and that time versus money equation was a significant one early on.
Yeah.
As you say, I had the time, but I didn't have the money. So I had to develop my strategy to work towards my strengths.
It's interesting you say that you broke it down to basics, Dale, because my observations of your journey is, and it's, I think one of the key takeaways from your journey for everyone listening to this is, they look at your success, they see the value of the portfolio, they see you've got $150,000 in rental income, and they go, wow, I wonder what the secrets are. And if they like, they've had the privilege of hearing this story now, and they go, wow, okay, all he did was the basics, and he applied the basics. Because what happens is the complexity comes with scale. The complexity doesn't come from doing more complex things. And I think if people can let that land, because you bought a property in Parramatta, then you held it for the long term, then you bought a property in Albury, and then you bought another one in Albury, and then you sold one in Parramatta. These things in isolation are not very complex. They're simple. They had some emotion, and there was a certain element of wisdom and experience that you needed to apply at the time. But in isolation, each of those things is simple. The complexity comes just with scale over time if you don't do the basics well. And I think that I'm with Ben. It's inspiring. The fact that you've done it on modest incomes, the fact that you've done it outside of capital city markets shows that it can be done. The fact that you've been very analytical in your approach, and you're a very, very good money manager, which I feel like is born very, very early days from the observations that you saw with your dad and some of those early values that they instilled in you, and also visually seeing what happens on the good seasons on the farm and what happens on the bad seasons in a farm. I feel like they've all weaved beautifully through your story to now be in a situation to fulfill the promise that you said to yourself that you don't ever want to be broke. So that's a big tick for you. So my final, well, they're my observations. My final question for you is we're always going on two journeys. We're going on the journey of achievement, which is the stuff we've just talked about on the scoreboard, but it's also that journey of fulfillment. What's it going to feel like for you, to be having these conversations with your kids and, to let them know that you set this up before they came into the world, and then you get to share some of the life experiences. Well, what's it going to feel like for you to fulfill that as you now move into this debt retirement phase?
Hopefully they listen. I know with kids, particularly once they enter into teenage years, it can be very difficult for them to listen to what mum or dad might have to offer them, because what would they know?
Yeah.
But yeah, hopefully it will be very rewarding to know that I can leave something for them, and this can set them up. And also even now, just in that lifestyle piece that you guys often talk about too, that it's not just about working hard and scrimping and saving everything now. We are regularly away on trips around Australia. We regularly, every couple of years, we do a 3-month extended trip. Most years we do 1, if not 2, 4 or 5 week trips.
Wow.
So it's also about rewarding yourself and then building that family relationship around that leisure and recreation to reap the benefits of all that hard work we've done.
Genuine lifestyle by design. That's
exactly. Like even just
incredible.
this year alone, we did 5 weeks in the Red Centre. We've literally just come back from 2 weeks on Kangaroo Island. So yeah, we are often out and about and adventuring around, and hopefully we have some plans.
You do have the
more
camper
travel.
trailer, and you do have the fishing boats. So there's two little things that you got to experience your weekends. Well done, mate. Well done. There is so much here to love about your story, and there's so much here that people can take little pieces away, and as they, to your point, as they get the jigsaw of their own life in place. But mate, well done. You and Fleur are inspiring, and you're right. Not many people get past 1 investment property, and you guys are sitting at a portfolio that has 6 in it. That puts you in a very unique position, and I'm really grateful that you're prepared to come on and share your wisdom for the benefit of our community.
Yeah, cheers, Bryce. Appreciate it.
Well done, Dale.
Ooh, Ben, how's that quote? Renting from the bank to expose myself to capital growth. That's a unique one.
He saw it as buying exposure to capital growth. I think that is but there is a journey that Dale has been on, like if you think about the share portfolio, he took margin lending, so he did see, again, exposing himself to capital growth, but that's an area normally where most people have a bit of red ink or a little bit of a burn in his particular case. But he timed the market really, really well in terms of making that call, then took a pivot towards property, and on the back of this really strong underlying motivation, didn't want to end up poor.
Didn't want to end up broke. The experience that Dad had with debt haunted him for a little while, and he needed to overcome that. So I wonder how many people are listening to this now, Ben, have also got a recoil when it comes to debt, maybe from an experience that they were exposed to as a kid that they saw growing up, or maybe an experience that they had themselves. But that's a monkey on the back that is a credit to Dale and Fleur, that they were able to just rid themselves of that fear around debt. And as you saw from that story, turned it into a wonderful story of asset accumulation and overcoming some of that early paradigm thinking.
Yeah, and it's a similar story to some of our other people who have come on the summer series around doing it regionally. So we haven't had that sort of classic buy in the big cities, get nothing done. These are people who, through their circumstance, have and concern around the levels of debt that they take on early, have again been examples of turning apples into apple pie. So he's getting his hands dirty in terms of the renovation work that he's been able to do. That's accumulated or accelerated the equity gain that he's been able to enjoy as part of that. So it very much is, I think, a really nice combination of doing the basics super well, where we're talking about he's got a good foundation of critical thinking. And in terms of effort on return, he's getting the maximum effort on return, not working stupid hours or incredibly difficult hours and thinking that it's all up to him. But he has actually taken the situation into his own hands. And so to Dale's credit, and as you say, to Fleur, they've now got this big portfolio. And where I see them now is the question mark around making that next post a winner. And that is about planning. Dale and Fleur have got a significant base of savings there that they can work with. But it is about, for me, it's about reward for effort at this point. Get yourselves a beautiful home on a bit of acreage or maybe on the water or whatever it is. Don't be afraid to buy something pretty that doesn't need doing up. But I reckon Dale's probably sitting back going, yeah, but I could, but I don't mind doing it. And I think I could add value to it. So I can see that sort of playing through Dale's head right now. But it's a great story. And then really landing the plane. I mean, that's where the plan would do a great job in terms of he doesn't need to really add too many more to portfolio. He just needs to organise the situation where he gets
next step.
Picking
What's the next step?
Next step. So it's a great story.
Yeah, because the original plan with the 6 properties was to sell 3 and retain 3, and then that's now pivoted to retaining all 6. So really what we're going to do is, our advice would be to just get real confirmation on what that next step looks like and actually run some numbers. But he is someone who definitely knows his numbers. You cannot accuse him of not knowing that, and is very well read. Is a detailed person, said that he's an analytical person, and thankfully, he doesn't use that analytical side to have paralysis by analysis. So
firefighter salary too, Bryce. Again, another sort of, I love the 2 teachers that we've spoken to so far. I love the fact that, our emergency services people that we're talking to. So we're not talking to, people on huge incomes here. We're basically talking to people who provide for the community, do a great service to the community in educating those, next generation, or to protect, firefighters have very difficult jobs, when they're in flight. So it really is another testimony to obviously, how you allocate your time and also being able to create that sort of wealth base on intermediate, moderate salaries.
Well done, Dale. Well done, Fleur. It's an incredible story. It is a story of delayed gratification and hard work and knowing your numbers. So that is incredible, Ben. Just a reminder for folks as we are now getting into January, just that if they want to check out our masterclass, we've launched it officially this week, Ben. thepropertycouch.com.au/masterclass. Go and check it out. You and I put some of the very best we've got into that to show people how to retire on $2,000 per week. So hopefully you're using and hearing stories of inspiration over this summer series, Ben, and you want to learn how to take action. That is a good place to start to go and check it out.
Yeah, we put a lot of effort into, getting the content rich enough. Like anything, there is a bit to learn. So there's a rich amount of content in there for those people who go in with a really great attitude and a really great open mind about what the potential is. And again, I come back to that sustained happiness story in basically wanting to make sure people take action this year. That's a great place to start.
Free resources, Ben. The Masterclass is free. The More app, MOOR, that app is free. You can go to makemoneysimpleagain.com.au, get our best-selling book there. You can get that for free. You can go to the Armchair Guide to property investing. So go to the armchairguide.com.au. All we ask for is we'll send you a physical book for free, but all we ask for is that you pay for postage for us to send that to you. This podcast each week, you can go to our YouTube channel, you can go to our socials. We're trying to give out as much information as we possibly can for free so that people can, hear these stories and go, I want to be one of them. I want to put my hand up at the end of this year, come on the 2023-2024 summer series and tell others how to do it, because you will be as inspiring as Dale and Fleur have been in this episode, Ben. But mate, until next week.
Take action. Your future self will thank you for it.
It sounds like you pushed play then. Well said, though. Well said. We'll see you next week, folks.
Hey guys, Bryce here again. Just want to catch you before you go and let you know, if you're new to our community, there are a lot of episodes to catch up on, but it's really important that you start from the very beginning at episode number 1. Because episode 1 through to 20 share all of the foundational pillars and frameworks that you need to know to get the best out of listening to this podcast. So I'd recommend that you start there, and the little tip is to maybe start on 1.5 speed. Now, for those of you that are time poor and don't have time to go back from the beginning, don't worry, we've got you covered as well, because we've created a binge guide that goes through all of the details and makes it easy for you to read and get up to speed very, very quickly. So if you go to thepropertycouch.com.au/fast track, you will be able to download that binge guide and you will be up to speed in no time. And whilst you're there, I've got a few extra goodies for you, because we have our top 5 frameworks that you'll learn on this podcast, as well as the Make Money Simple Again ebook, which will help you with the foundations of basic money management, so you'll have everything you need to succeed in building your own lifestyle design and getting the best out of this podcast. Now, just a reminder that anything that we cover on this podcast is not considered financial advice. We certainly recommend that you get your unique circumstances looked at by your individual advisor, and everything we talk about is just general in nature. But folks, I want to encourage you again to go to thepropertycouch.com.au/fast track, and you can go and get all those goodies and catch up right away.